13th. It was the 13th night on Friday the 13th. Is when a dream became a nightmare and I heard screams of things I saw I couldn't believe, like the atrocities of Gaza, the genocidal practices of civilians right on TV, no representation for the besieged, no assemblies of the peace, just war like Southern United Rasa, Sue 13. The 13 stars representing the stars of David, the 13 colonies of the United States of America, the Statue of Liberty, which is deception, stayed in the home of the free, except for the slaves. I saw a cotton plantation full of graves. I heard the voices of the graves stating the 13th Amendment is still slavery. According to the statistics, mass incarceration, prisoners are the new slaves. The Democrats are the nice slave masters, and the Republicans are the mean slave masters, but it's all systemic. Slavery never ended. Slavery never ended. Slavery never ended.
So, Anthony, welcome to the Black and Raww podcast. It's really good to have you on.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Nah, it's blessed. It's blessed. So I sort of just wanted to get into it, and for those that are watching on YouTube, we're going to talk about Great Grind and Glory sort of throughout it. But I remember before I said I love the shirt and I love the branding of it.
Thank you, brother.
It's all good. It's all good. So I wanted to sort of ask you. I know sort of in the US also and in the UK as well, there's a lot of narratives about absent fathers and fathers that aren't present, and things like this, and sort of the impact that has on people. And I know for you, for someone that had lost their father, your father was present, and then unfortunately you lost him. And so I just wanted you to sort of talk about what that experiences was like for you as a young boy.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. And it is a typical, I guess you could say, norm to see single parent households, especially in the Black community in the United States of America. So it's common to see it. And it's also common to see that young Black boys is not growing up with their fathers. Their fathers are either incarcerated, their fathers are either dead, or their fathers are either in some form of addiction, or something is going on where their father is not in their household or present. But in my case, in my situation, my father was present every single day of the year, every single day of the week. When I can be with my father, I will. Was always with my father. In fact, I lived with my father for a certain time and period. But it ended up, my mom ended up having a divorce, so to speak, with my father. So that ended up splitting the family dynamic or whatnot. But yeah, growing up with my father, I'm learning, certain type of traits and certain type of things that father teaches a son. It's a certain type of relationship there. There's a certain type of connection there. There's a certain type of love there. With my father in particular, he had diabetes. So, when I'm growing up being, sort of speak, a caregiver to my father because of his health conditions. So this formulated a whole newfound bond between me and my father that's like no other. I would say, in the dynamics of growing up in the inner city communities in America where we grew up at. So that it was a different dynamicism. However, it changes when he dies. So I don't know if you want me to get into that before you ask the next question, but that was pretty much how I was growing up with my father. I loved it. He was my hero. He was my provider. We locked in. We had a different communication that was different from my mother. But we were solid on.
Yeah. So, I think there's sort of quite a lot of things to sort of unpack in sort of that. I guess, what was that the sort of relationship in sort of, as you're saying, you sort of his caregiver, and, I think when you sort of see your parent and you see this person who you love and you think is a superhero and you think is amazing, and there's quite a vulnerability with somebody who you're caring for. How did that impact your relationship with your dad?
Yeah, it just brought us closer. It just brought me nearer to my dad. It brought me closer to my dad. It made me feel protected. It made me feel secure. It made me feel confidence. It made me feel all of these things to have that close dynamic relationship with my father. So that's how I felt in that moment. But then it was a contrary feeling, if you will, when he died. And when he died, I didn't have that support that I needed at the time from the ones that I loved the most, which is my mother, which is my, my closest siblings. And and so because I didn't have that love and support from them once my dad died, all of the love and all of the, the confidence and all of these things that I had while my dad was alive, I now didn't have and I was disconnected from because he died. So it created a whole different shift.
Yeah. And what did that shift look like? How did life after your dad's passing look like?
And when it was a downward spiral, from as early as I can remember, I remember my mom asking me, like, son, you one of my beautifulest, handsomest sons. You have a beautiful smile. How come you're always frowning?
Oh,
It's what she
interesting.
used to ask me. How come you're always frowning? But it was, I couldn't explain to my mother at that time the anger was from the grief of losing my father. So this is what happens when my father was, out of my life and out of the picture now, that happiness now turned into sadness. That sadness turned into grief. That grief turned into anger. That anger then formulated into other things, whether it's vices or whether it's me releasing that anger out in violence. So now I'm joining gangs and I'm involving myself in gang fights, or I'm involving myself in fights at school. I'm becoming disruptive. I mean, it was a downward spiral. I can just go on and on and on and on about the effects of not having my father.
Yeah, so I guess it sounded like having him there was definitely a stabilizing factor for you, and him, being somebody who can support you, put love around you. But also, as you were talking about that, he showed you lots of things in terms of values and being a man and having that with you. And I think when I started the episode sort of saying about, the narrative of absent fathers and stuff like this, and I don't personally, I don't know. I don't know whether the role of a man is sort of being diminished within society. Um, but hearing you just talk, you can hear how the role of a father had a huge impact for you and how that sort of led on to your grief and your sadness turning to anger. And I don't know, were you searching for male figures in other places? Was that sort of like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So that's how I ended up. So I talk about it in my book, Grit, Grind, and Glory. I talk about how I'm looking for this father figure and I'm trying to make a transition and I don't have this guidance, so to speak. So I'm looking for this guidance, but I so happen to find this male father role figure or guidance of what I saw to be guidance at the time is with a street gang and my peers who we formulated bonds and bond with each other over trauma and other issues that was related to us in our current event, our living circumstances or whatnot. So this is what happened. I turned to the streets, became a gang member, and looked up to other gang members as my father figure.
Yeah. And I guess that's then where, things can sort of spiral and maybe you sort of join a gang and, I can't speak on the experiences of it. I can only just sort of imagine that once you're in it, you're sort of entrenched in that world and you sort of only get deeper and deeper and deeper. And I guess it's hard for people to pull you out of it. I think because you also find this belonging, you find this group. Whereas humans, we love to belong. We love to look up to people that are able to
Yeah,
give us support. And maybe just because, and some people will be like, oh, gangs and stuff are wrong and stuff like that. I'm not saying that they are right, but it's what they provide for somebody is what brings them in and keeps them in.
for sure. So I like to state the fact that if you're part of a gang, you came to this gang for some reason, right? It's a lot of multitudes of reasons why people join gangs. But for the most part, most people join gangs is because of something that happened in their life that went wrong somewhere, and now they're trying to look for this gang to make it right, or appear for it to be right, or in my case, having a sense of belonging and having a sense of feeling loved by a community, right? That people who accepted me for who I was and where I was at that time, how I thought, and vice versa. I accepted them, I didn't judge them, and they brought me in. And this is how gangs are formulated. And the bond between that brotherhood, if you will, between that camaraderie, this is what keeps people locked in it, because it's more than just a clique. No, this is someone I I died alongside with, or this is someone I went to jail alongside with, or this is someone I ran from the police with, or this is someone I've broken cars with. It's like more than just, oh, he's from my gang, and so we're bonded. No, it's more than that.
Yeah, definitely. And how did your involvement with gangs in an early age, how did that look and sort of what were the consequences of it?
Yeah, so how it looked at growing up in a gang is like, again, I got initiated at 13 years old. And part of my gang, you have to get initiated, meaning you got to get jumped on. So you getting beat on by five other youth kids around your age group, and they put you on, and right after that, you got to commit an act to prove your act, prove your allegiance to the clique, to the gang, or whatnot, right? So you got to prove yourself. You got to go on demos. You got to do lots of acts of violence to prove that you are who you say you are. So in that lifestyle, it's a mentality that you lock in, and this mentality is almost like a bewitching type of situation, or a brainwashing type of situation, where you can't think for yourself, you can't act on your own accords. You got to be in compliance with, with the gang, and what that dictates, and what that politics or whatnot. But the consequences of being in a gang lifestyle are numerous, but none of them are good. None of them are good. You wind up in jail, you wind up on drugs, you wind up betrayed, you wind up snaked, or double backdoored, as they say.
What's
Um,
that? What's double backdoor?
Backdoored is basically, it's like act of betrayal between you and who you thought was a loyal brother, but crossed you and ended up crossing you with either the police, or crossing you with a female, or however it's
Yeah, any
transpired.
sort of
It's
betrayal.
not good.
Yeah,
It's
no.
ultimate betrayal. So anyway, the consequences of joining a gang life ultimately is going to lead you to some failure, some
Mm,
dead end, where you're going to be forced to make a decision, whether to go on with this lifestyle and to its ultimate end, which is death, or you reach your rock bottom and you decide you want to change your life. That's that's what happened with me. I decided I wanted to change my life after hitting the rock bottom.
yeah. And I guess for you, what were those consequences? What did that lead you to?
Yeah, so for me, I went to juvenile hall, um, for committing robberies. Again, this is part of the gang lifestyle. This is what you do when you part of the gang lifestyle. You're not a normal civilian, so you don't live by normal civilian rules and laws. No, so I'm breaking laws every day as a gang member, and part of that criminality. So those are parts of the forms of the consequences. Another form of the consequences is the mentality, the thinking, right? You're operating at a lower vibration. You're not factoring in the ramifications of your actions and the things that you're doing to people, communities, environments, yourself. You lack emotional intelligence. That's a consequence of. You lack maintaining relationships. That's a consequence of. You lack self love and self confidence. So you view yourself or those who look like you as an enemy. That's a consequence of. Like, it's the consequences are numerous, brother.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we talk about sort of people trying to find a sense of belonging, and then you then, end up in a gang, and you're talking about these consequences, a lack of self-love, a lack of emotional intelligence, juvenile prison, a lot of these things can either sort of continue pushing you back for the rest of your life, or as you're saying, you ended up being in rock bottom. And I really wanted to sort of touch on your experiences. Sorry, I really wanted to touch on your experiences in the juvenile, in the youth prison, and yeah, what was that like? Like, what was it sort of, I guess, being treated as a criminal so early in your life?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question because it's a question that's relevant, especially right now in current times where here in America we're dealing with, especially in California, the state, we're dealing with situations where the youth are being abused, sexually abused, mentally abused, emotionally abused by staff inside of these detention centers. So for me, going inside the detention centers, I went into it with a mindset of I'm a gang member. So I'm looking for my enemies and I'm looking to attack my enemies because as I observed at 14 years old, 13 years old, the nature of what's going on in this environment, in this confinement of a juvenile detention, I'm seeing what's going on. And this is the law of the land. You rush your enemy. You ask him where he's from. And if he say the wrong hood, you get off on him. That's the law of the land. This is, and so now I'm adapting to this mentality. So now I'm hyper vigilant. I'm on alert. I'm on constant alert. I'm on a go. Once I see my enemy, I'm rushing them. I'm attacking them. So it's creating this viciousness already that I'm being conditioned to year in, year out, and it's not changing. And it's not changing because there's no programs in the juvenile detention center that is coattailing the violence or coattailing the politics that exist there. There's no mentoring. Mentors don't come inside the institution and help us out or to even discourage us from having, or continuing this violence or continuing down this path of misbehaving. No one is there to coach us and give us life skills. No one's there to educate us on, skills or becoming useful with our hands or critical thinkers with our brains. No one's there to do any of these things. The staff is only there to be supervised or supervise us rather. So it's paid supervision. And in that confinement, as a young person going through, these constant fights and constant gang wars and constant politics, it's easy for a young person to lose track and focus of what's going on in day-to-day life, to even care about my future, to even care about, okay, what do I want to do next year? Do I want to go to school? Do I not? Do I want to get a trade? Do I not? I don't have time to think about that when I have enemies rushing at me or I'm rushing at them. Yeah. Right? This is the mentality, and this is what's going on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And it's quite interesting because when I hear you talking about that, it sort of sounds like youth prison is sort of setting you up to just come back into juvenile prison or to end up transitioning to adult prison. And it's a shame because if you were able to get to these young people now, as you're saying, if you were able to get them to think creatively, to use their hands, to figure out what do they want in their life, to have those mentors, you could stop a lot of that sort of cycle of violence and that cycle of coming back into prison and coming back out, and then that becomes their norm. And I guess for you, how do you feel like juvenile prison set you up for adult prison, for the adult prison system?
That's exactly how I feel. I just felt that the juvenile detention center was just preparing me for the adult prison system. That's all it was doing. So everything that I was learning inside the juvenile detention system, as far as institutional politics, I learned that before I even went to adult prison. So I already knew that the Mexicans hang with the Mexicans, the blacks hang with the blacks, the whites hang with the whites. It was already segregated inside the juvenile institutions. Where did the youth get it from? Of course, they got it from the adult institutions. That's where the youth got it from. But it has been adapted in these juvenile detentions, and the administration is doing nothing to change it. It's doing nothing to change it. So definitely, it was just getting me ready and preparing me for prison. And that's exactly what it is. That's why it doesn't work. That's why the juvenile detention center and its system, it does not work. It's a failed system. It was meant to be failed. If they really wanted to fix it, they have the funding to fix it. They have all of the money to fix it. They have all of the resources to fix it, right? But they're not trying to fix it. And one of the pivotal reasons how I know they're not trying to fix it is because I'm a qualified person who can go in and help be part of the solution and contribute. However, they don't allow a person like me to be in. Why? Because they feel like we have the influence of the young people and we use that influence for something bad. Oh, you want it? No, he might go in and have them sell drugs, or he might go in and want to recruit them for gangbanging, already demonizing me. But they would rather put somebody in my position who they deem qualified, and this person don't come from the reality that these young youth is coming from. They don't come from the gang settings or the politics of the environment that these youth is coming from. They're coming in with button-up shirts and not looking like the youth. They're talking over the youth head, and the youth is not connecting with them. So this is their alternative. They're giving the youth a fake representation of who we are, of the true mentors who can go in and do the real work. But the institution is giving them a fake representation of us, and thus that's why the system is not working.
Yeah, and it's quite unfortunate because you guys and people that have been through the prison system and that have been able to change your lives are the people best suited to help these young boys and young girls change their own lives, because
right.
You're not going to look at someone who's never been involved in crime or violence and hear them be like, you should change your life. This is how you do it. And it's like, but mate, you've never been where I am. You can't meet me where I'm at. You can only be like, oh, acting all righteous and everything. And, listen, those people that are going in, I'm sure they're doing it for a good reason. But those aren't the people that should be going in. Those aren't the people that should be trying to shape these young boys' minds. And it's just sort of a continuation of you saying, of profiling, of stereotyping and being like, oh, he couldn't have changed his life. This must be a facade. Like he couldn't have, he couldn't have came out of our system and done better. Like that's not how it works. We didn't design it to do that. So it's really frustrating, to be honest, because as you're saying, if they wanted to, and I'm sure, and if you and me can talk about this and understand this, how can the people that are in charge, that are paid to know about these things, not want to do it? When some people could start spouting out conspiracy theories and they're like, they just want to keep black people down. They just want to keep, it's usually people that go into prison of lower income. They just want to keep them down. I understand I understand sometimes when people are saying that, because you know the solutions, or even you can go and find the solutions. There are smart enough people in this world that can tell you what to do, but you've got to end up implementing it, don't you?
Yeah, and another thing I will add is those type of programs that we try to implement in terms of mentoring and peer-to-peer relationships, like, they are often discouraged in a juvenile detention center. And you have to understand, well, why is that? Well, it makes sense when you're thinking of job security for them. It doesn't work if they are not receiving juveniles coming in for criminal crimes, so on and so forth, right? They don't have a job. They don't have a position. So it works when there is violence inside of the institution, where they can get hazardous pay, where they can get, additional overtime work, all of these things, right? And so it helps the system to have, mishaps, missteps, and it helps the system to not include mentoring in programs that will really, really give systemical change within our communities with these Black and brown youths, in particular in our communities. So it works for the system to not have it. So it's all by design. It's working perfectly. The system is working perfectly by not allowing a real solution to help really fix the system, if that makes sense.
No, that 100% makes sense. Yeah, definitely, because it's working for the purpose that they want. It's not working for the betterment of humans. It's just profit and, margins and whatever, or all of those things that don't really matter when we're talking about young people, when we're talking about adults who, if anything, are vulnerable. They need to have people like you. They need to have people that have been through it to help them see a different version of what it can be, of what their life can
Absolutely.
be.
And if I may, I wanted to just touch on some of the conditions that I endured while I was in juvenile detention, right? Such as abuse, physical abuse. I got my ass beat plenty of times by staff, grown ass men, kicking me in my mouth, kick my tooth, chip my tooth. I had incidents where I got in a fight with another youth and the staff slammed me up, kick me, spray me, mace me, and then throw me in a hot shower where that shit felt like I was burning, excruciating pain. I mean, I got, verbally assaulted, telling me I ain't gonna be shit. I'm going to prison. I ain't gonna amount to shit. Like, all of these type of things is going on. And I experienced that when I was in juvenile detention center. So just imagine what that did to my mind. Already on top of the trauma, already on top of the anger, already on top of the self-hate I have for myself and the hate that I have for other gang and tribal members. Like, it's just compounded trauma upon trauma upon trauma. So now by the age of 16, 17, I'm operating like a lunatic now at a young age because I don't know how to control my urges. I don't know how to control my reactions. I'm a very violent person. My first reaction is just to attack a person and not to talk things out. So I didn't even learn communication skills, none of these things. So all of this was a result of being in the juvenile detention center.
Yeah, which is awful. I'm sorry to hear that those were your experiences. And it's sad that those are the people who we pay to supervise, I guess is the word, because it's not to help. It's not to make lives
It's not
better.
to help.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because you're sort of just reinforcing, as you're saying, the traumatic experiences you're going through, and you're beating down on somebody. How can we expect young people to come out of a juvenile system and thrive in society when that is what they have been experiencing, and then it's the stigma of coming out, and then it's the stigma of having a label on you of violent, when really it should be this person's been through loads of shit and they really just need a hug, more than a hug, but you know what I mean? They need love, they need
Right.
care.
And so also let's talk about that. Let's talk about the aftercare of a young person going into a juvenile detention center. There is no aftercare services. There's no one to check on you. There's no one to ask, how are you doing? There's no one to come in and do a mental health evaluation and see where your mind is at and how you function. They throw us right back into the same communities we come from, where all of the other young kids who are traumatized and victimized and experience the same abuse and the same trauma. And now we're all out together. No one received counsel. No one received mental health services. None of this. So now you have a bunch of young kids, young juvenile delinquents now out of the juvenile detention center with no resources, with no mentors, with no people to guide them and steer them. And so they fall right back into the same trap.
Yeah. What can you do? It's annoying. It's annoying, isn't it? I mean, conversations like these, I think I hope they help, and I do think they will help as well. But even having people like you that have been through it and are talking about their experiences, and also showing that you can sort of come out of the other end. And you mentioned you're hitting rock bottom. What was your rock bottom, and how did you climb out of it?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. So when you inside of the juvenile detention center, that's one institution that you have to navigate. And then you transition, in my case, to what they call the county jail. And I describe that as well in my book, how the county jail experience was for me, and which was horrible. And then transitioning from the county jail into now adult prison. So it's three different institutions. And every institution has its own set of politics, rules, mentalities, so on and so forth. So going into the adult prison system for me as a young person, I had a lot of time. I was sentenced to 25 years in state prison at 17 years old. That's a lot of time to be thinking about on top of everything else that I'm dealing with at the time. So it was hard. It was hard for me going in that prison system, in that institution, without having no support, without having nobody to, write me. I mean, it was a time period when I went 7 years with no communication from anyone outside, no communication, meaning no letters, no telephone calls, no visit. Just imagine. Can you imagine 7 years with no contact of your loved ones? No hugs, no kisses, not even a voice. I wasn't even receiving phone calls for 7 years. So can you imagine my mentality while incarcerated, and how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling? I'm at my lowest of low. I feel like nobody loves me, nobody cares about me. I feel like I'm in this time tunnel. I feel like the world outside completely forgot about me. My mental health is declining. I'm not eating right. I'm stressed, and on top of the oppression. On top of the oppression of the prison system here in California, America, the prison system here is oppressive to the point where it almost feels like someone is stomping down your spirit and kicking your soul. That's how I felt. That's how the oppression feels. When they lock you in a cell for 24 hours in a day, you're not allowed to come out to eat. You're not allowed to come out to shower. You're not allowed to come out the cell, period. Not even for some fresh air, not even to see the sun or the moon. Now imagine. Let me ask you this question. If you kept a dog inside of a cell without allowing that dog to come out to eat, without allowing that dog to come out to play, would you consider that cruel and unusual punishment for that animal?
Yeah, I'd consider it cruel and punishment for anybody. Yeah,
absolutely,
100%.
Absolutely, right? So with that being said, it was cruel and unusual punishment times 10. Right? We're on lockdowns. I've been on lockdowns 9 months, 24 hours in the cell, not able to come out for 9 months. By the time I come back out, when the sun finally hits my skin, it's scorching me because I haven't seen the sun haven't touched my skin in so long. So it's scorching my skin and burning my skin. That's how long I haven't been out to see the sun. So when you describe and you asking a question about the conditions of prison, it was oppressive and horrible. So when you're in that type of state, of course you're gonna reach your rock bottom. And for a lot of people, escapism is how they get out of it. Escapism and drugs, escapism and their own fantasies, escapism with mental insanity, right? Some form of escapism is how they escape that oppression. But for me, I had to pray. I had to fast. I had to give my life to God. And that's what I did. I gave my life over to a higher spirit and a higher being that is controlled, that I know is beyond me. So in that lower state, that's the only thing I can do is pray. And I got on my knees. I prayed. I'm crying out. Right? I'm crying. My soul is crying. Because I'm Persian. Right? I'm purging, but I'm also hurt and I'm also oppressed. So I'm having these moments where I'm crying out. And of course, you don't want to cry out loud because in prison, there's this, mask of masculinity. That's a whole nother conversation where everyone is just wearing the tough guy mask and no one wants to cry. So in these moments of vulnerability, I'm crying because my soul is being oppressed and I don't know how to deal with this situation, being so young and being so locked up and confined with all of that time. I had to pray to a higher power. Lord, please get me out of this, please. Yeah. That's how I hit my rock bottom, bro. And and God answered my prayer, right? Because once I humbled myself and realized that it was a higher power in control of all of this, then I started to realize that, oh, okay, well, there's a divine plan in all of this as well. And so I started to believe in a divine plan and started to clean my act up. And for me cleaning my act up, this is how I start to pick myself back up from that lower state, right? And rise my vibration, rise my IQ levels, rise rise everything within me and become a better version of myself. But of course, though, that had to go through a transition too. It was a process. Like it didn't happen overnight because when you're caught up in that gang mentality and that gang lifestyle, especially here in South Central Los Angeles, California, where it started, it's hard for a young person to get out of that mentality and to embark upon a whole nother mentality.
Yeah. Damn. Oh, there was a lot there. and just sort of listening to you, and yeah, that would break anybody's spirit. Like that would break anybody's soul. And being treated less than human, it just you sort of have a bit of an understanding for like how does someone climb out of that? And we've talked about all the things that have happened, um, and that's not to sort of take away responsibility or anything, but I think when you understand somebody's journey a lot more, it gives you sort of grace to be like, yo, like that was intense. If that was anybody's else, if that was anyone else's life experiences, you wouldn't expect them to be any different. You wouldn't
Yeah,
expect for
exactly.
it to be any different. Um, and I'm glad that you were able to find God and that you were able to start to climb out of it. Um, was there any sort of, we've talked about you being a mentor for others and talking about the importance of mentors for others. Did you have any mentors that helped you on your
I
journey?
did. I did. I'm glad you asked that question. And I talk all about my mentor on page 43 in my book. And if I may, I want to read a little excerpt just to kind of describe who this mentor was for me in my life at that time, where I needed a mentor the most. Okay. So this is in my book on page 43. Okay, here it is, man. So I spent months philosophizing, dissecting sociology books with a utilization of a spiritual filter. My mentor name was Tobias, which is a legendary name according to biblical scriptures. Tobias became the inner city beacon of hope, the revolutionary leader of the disenfranchised and the marginalized and the poor. He brought the light of power of influence, and I felt safe and secure around him. He trained me in spiritual sacred knowledge and training. Also, I would add that he also offered me a hug when I needed a hug the most. And you mentioned that earlier in the conversation where sometimes we just need a hug. And that was exactly my situation. I needed a hug from all of that pain I was going through. I needed a hug from that grief I was going through with losing my father. I needed a hug that, I lost my little cousin EJ. He got killed in the county jail. I needed the hug from that. I lost my grandma when I was in the county jail. I needed a hug from that. That brother was the only person who seen me and gave me a hug, bro. So imagine that hug that's been desperately needed and desperately wanted for years, finally come at that moment. It was like it was a breakthrough moment. It was a breakthrough moment. It was a moment where I was now able and open enough to allow somebody else to steer my life in a positive direction. And that's what he was. He was a person that steered my life in a positive direction, that gave me guidance, but also told me to believe in myself. And it wasn't just him, it was enough. It was a lot of people within the course of my life that was placed in my life who were guiding me and mentoring me along the way. I just so happened to be a smart young youth who heeded advice and heeded, information and things that people were telling me that was older than me. So I had that advantage as a young youth to heed information and take it in and receive it and then go out and apply it. So, a lot of it was them and a lot of it was me also on my part, just going through the refinement. That's why I entitled my book Grit, Grind, and Glory, because you have to go through a grinding process. And that grinding process is you addressing you in the mirror, all of the hurt, all of the pain, all of the trauma, being able to forgive people only so that you can move forward with your life and let go of the burden. Sometimes we carry a lot of burdens on our soul, on our spirit, on our hearts, on our mind. But when you relieve it by forgiving people and allowing that stuff to just let go, right? And let God, then your life becomes a lot more pure and light. I felt light letting go of all of those burdens. And these mentors was helping me along the way to give me that guidance and provide that information for me to do so.
Yeah. Um, and you sort of saying that you were ready to sort of receive that. You were ready to hear what they are saying and be able to take that in and really sort of soak it up and when you said that all you needed was a hug, like you know what, I there was some light, not light tears. I didn't have a tear in my eye, but I could feel the welling up of
Man, bro,
emotion.
because it's real. It's real.
Yeah, and it's just simple, isn't it? Like it's nothing big, it's nothing major. It's just human to human connection, bro. It's just a hug. It's something
That's
which you
it.
do every day, but it can
Yeah.
bring so much emotion and so much sort of rawness with it. Um, and I'm super happy that there were people that were able to guide you through that, and
And I'm super blessed for that, man. I'm
yeah,
super blessed for that. I'm super thankful. And I thank God and everybody else who came into the process with helping me in that. But I'm super grateful and thankful because that's my narrative, but that's not the narrative for everybody. Everybody don't have people who come into their life and try to steer it in the right direction. Or some people may not be ready for it. They just reject it, right? And they have to go on their own path and figure out, as I say, you have to figure out your personal legend in life. As you journey in life, you have to discover what that legend is. And whenever you discover what it is, you got to reach your glory in it, right? Whatever that may mean to you. Some people, though, they're not ready for that, So it's a matter of being ready for it. And then it's also a matter of the accessibility of these type of people to be at reach. That's also another thing, too, because if I'm ready, say I'm ready. But there's no mentors around. They're all jailed, or they're all killed, or they all are talked down or demonized in the media or demonized within these groups. Then where do I go for the mentorship? Where do I go for the guidance? Where do I go for the help?
yeah. Where do you go? And those people need they need to be available, but people also need to know about them, because you can be in a situation where you maybe know someone that knows someone, and then they're able to influence you, or somehow randomly someone comes into your life. And but like, it needs to be easier for people to find them. It needs to be just simple. Be like, oh, I need a mentor, or I need someone just to give me something to help me understand where I am and where I want to go. It is essential. And we've talked about the role of God in your life, and we always hear sort of about Christianity. I think in the Black community there is a lot of Christianity, but there is also a lot of Islam. And when you were telling me sort of about Islam and how that has helped you, you gave me some Malcolm X sort of vibes. You know what I mean? Like that's the vibe I was getting. So can you just sort of tell me a bit about Islam and how that did shift your mindset away from criminality?
It was beautiful. First of all, how I came into the religion of Islam, and I mentioned that in my book, how it all started for me. And it started on a prison yard where I had absolutely nothing to do. And they were coming around with a sign-in sheet to enlist people for Arabic class. And so at the time, I had no interest for religion, right? I believed in the higher power in God, but, I didn't call this God a specific name, or, that's how I kind of conceptualized it in my head. But anyway, I signed up on the Arabic class list, and I went to the Arabic class just out of curiosity. And plus, there was really nothing for the youth to do at the time other than, escape somehow, or exercise all day, or involve themselves in some type of prison politics. So I decided to be curious, went inside the Arabic class, seeing what the brothers was doing, and learning. I'm a learner, right? At heart, I'm always one to be open to learning new experiences. So I went in with an open heart to learn new experiences. And what I discovered was something amazing, something that appealed to my heart, something that appealed to my mind, something that made sense to me. And so I embraced the religion head on. I took Shahada, which is bearing witness to the higher power. I went on Hajj. I just came back from Saudi Arabia, actually. So I made Umrah, actually. So it's been a wonderful experience because I had to replace the negative mentality and the negative habits that I had with something else, right? At the time, I didn't know what that something else was, but now I realize that something else was Islam. So I replaced the mentality of the gangs and the crime and the drugs with now the mentality of a person who is praying, fasting, believing, giving in charity, supporting people, helping the homeless, helping the people in the community, speaking highly of God, not associating anything with God, keeping, keeping my heart clean, forgiving, like all of the principles, like all of the things, that we should be living by as good human beings, right? Not only for ourselves, but also for the next human beings. And not only for the next human beings, because when you start to understand Islam, you realize it's bigger than just human beings. It involves everything within the creation, right? So you start being kind and more gentle and understanding with other beings, animals, plants, what have you. So it was just a whole mentality shift.
Yeah. And I think brilliantly sort of I don't ever want religion to ever sort of be washed out of society, because I think the importance of it, and whether you're a Christian, whether you're Islam, whether you're Buddhist, we're not here to argue, denominations and stuff like that, but just the essence of understanding there is a higher power and that we need to be kind to each other. That is something that should never be diluted, never be washed away, because it makes us better humans, I think, at the end of the day.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And I agree. I second that, because at the end of the day, you have to look yourself in the mirror. So if you treating other human beings negatively, disrespectfully, and you're still looking at yourself in the mirror with a straight face and able to smile about that, you need to check your humanity, man, straight up. And to your point, religion does have its place. Does it get out of context and all of this stuff at times? Yes, of course, that it happens, right? But how do you take the good of that, or of any situation rather, and then make better outcomes from it? You know what I'm saying? And so that's what I did. I extract the good from the religion, and I put back what doesn't apply to me, or what I can't utilize in this time, in this manner. But what I can, I utilize and I apply: prayer, fasting, eating right, being kind, talking kind, giving kind words to the poor, giving kind words to the homeless, giving food to the homeless. Well, all of these things, right? It makes me a better person. It makes me a better human being. Like, I had homeless people telling me that they want me with $1 million and not them. Wow. You want me with $1 million and not yourself? But this is now speaking to the essence of the human being as he's transformed, with replacing something with something else. For me, it was Islam.
Yeah, definitely. So what sort of motivated you to document your journey in the book Grit, Grind, and Glory? And how do you want the message of it to be portrayed to people, and maybe people that are facing similar challenges as well?
Right, man. Thank you for that question. So I had to document the process, like all of my ancestors documented the processes that they were going through during the years of slavery, during the years of Jim Crow, during the years of segregation, during the years of deconstruction, all the way up into present times. We've been, documenting our processes, documenting our lives here in America. So it was no exception with me. I thought it was very important that I documented everything that I went through, whether good or bad, so that I can utilize it for a message for the next generation, or people who are in similar lifestyles that I was once in, and they're probably stuck but can't figure out a solution how to get out. I provide that solution. Not only do I provide that solution, I also give them other hacks in life. For instance, in my book, The Creation of the Coffee Balls, I became an entrepreneur through that endeavor. So I turned a situation where someone who was humiliating me and debasing me into a situation where I created options for myself, seeing coffee as something that I can monetize, and also I can leverage relationships with and build a business off of it. And that business is still sustaining. That business sustaining me all the way until I got out of prison, where I was able to open up bank accounts and I was able to become a self-entrepreneur. So all of those things are documented in this book, but I felt that it was relevant and important for me to narrate my whole entire life existence, living in this country in America, Hence the the post title of the book is A Legendary Tale of How a Born Resilient Street Orphan Survived the Urban City Syndrome and Incarceration in a Post-Slavery Era of America. So this is us still documenting our lives here in America as we still being treated like slaves.
Yeah. And, and on that point of sort of still being treated like slaves, we talked about we've talked about the prison system, and I forgot what it was called. Ava DuVernay, I think it's 12th or 11th. Something, she made this video, this movie about how
13th.
13th. There we go. How do I always forget it? So amazing, so amazing. And
yeah.
I recommend anyone
in
should
fact,
watch it.
Not to cut your wisdom, brother,
No,
but in my
on.
new book that came out today, I have a poem called 13.
Nice.
Inspired by that movie or documentary.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. And I think the language of it, that I think she starts it off with saying the 13th Amendment and it talking about everybody being free except when you commit a crime. And we've talked about how the American justice system dehumanizes.
Real talk. Yes, yeah, that's it. I would love, before we end, if I could read that poem 13th, because I think it's so relevant and it ties into everything we've been discussing.
Mate, go on. Why not?
For sure.
Go on.
I appreciate you, man.
Nah, I think it's appropriate. I think it's definitely appropriate.
It's definitely appropriate. 1 second, let me find it.
Hopefully, maybe one day Ava DuVernay can listen to this. Send it to our publicist and just find it.
Yeah, here we go. 13th. It was the 13th night on Friday the 13th. Is when a dream became a nightmare and I heard screams of things I saw I couldn't believe, like the atrocities of Gaza, the genocidal practices of civilians right on TV, no representation for the besieged, no assemblies of the peace, just war like Southern United Rasa, Sioux 13. The 13 stars represent the stars of David, the 13 colonies of the United States of America, the Statue of Liberty, which is deception, stayed in the home of the free, except for the slaves. I saw a plantation full of graves. I heard the voices of the graves stating the 13th Amendment is still slavery. According to the statistics, mass incarceration, prisoners are the new slaves. The Democrats are the nice slave masters and the Republicans are the mean slave masters, but it's all systemic. Slavery never ended. Slavery never ended. Slavery never ended. 13.
No, this is what deserves. Brilliant, man. Brilliant.
Thank you, bro.
And I think that is sort of just a perfect place to just ask you my final question. And I've loved this whole conversation that we've had. And the question is, say if there's a young Black boy, and even a Black boy that is experiencing gang violence, that's experiencing sort of the circumstances that we've been talking about throughout this whole episode, how can something that help them with an understanding of themselves?
100%. The first thing first, I would tell them to love themselves. Love themselves before anybody else. Love themselves before, the car, the money, the jewelry, the women. Love themselves first. Secondly, I would encourage them to seek out and find somebody who believe in them, believe in their dreams, believe in them goals, and invest in them and seek help. Seek help. And even if that help means in the form of a hug, if you need a hug, ask for that hug. And if you don't know how to ask for that hug, go to somebody who just loving, somebody that's welcoming, and receive that hug that way. But ultimately, my message to the youth is never, ever, ever give up. No matter how bad the situation is, no matter how bad the circumstances get, it's going to always get better in your life. That's my advice to the youth.
Bro. Thank you very much, Anthony. Where can people find you? Where can people find your books? Let them know. Plug yourself, my friend.
I appreciate you, man. So you can find me, go to my website, gritgrindandglory.com. Once again, gritgrindandglory.com. This is my first memoir, autobiography, Grit, Grind, and Glory. My first book I wrote in 2002. You can find that on my website. Also, you can find it on Amazon. My Instagram handle is gritgrind_glory. Once again, gritgrind_glory. And my latest book that is out for release today, on this day, is called My Life in Poetry, right? With beautiful illustrations in it. It was released today. I'm going to go to some of the illustrations. I'm going to go to the ones right here that I love the most. Got beautiful illustrations in this book. It's a compilation of all of my poems and poetry while I was in prison. And it's giving light to some of the most cruel and unusual punishment situations that we occur while in prison. So I decided to write poems to relieve me, if you will, of that oppression. So that's out today. You can find that on my website, Grit, Grind, and Glory. And I think I mentioned it all, man.
No, that's bro. Thank you very much. I'm going to put all of those into the show notes so everyone can go and find it.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you, man. Hey, this been dope. This been exciting, bro. Appreciate it. I hope I go up in the UK. I hope to see y'all in the UK soon.
Yeah, man. Pop up, man. Pop up. I need to go to Cali, so we can do 2 trips in it.
Yeah.
Bro. So yeah, thank you very much, Anthony. I loved this. And hopefully we'll get to talk soon.
For sure, man. Thank you, man. I appreciate you, man.